You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Today, I'm going to continue again in my efforts to increase the number of beef recipes that I don't have on my website. I need more. So I'm going to be doing a steak again today. This is called Oscar style filet mignon. It's made with beef tenderloin. The recipe came from, I modified it from a recipe in a restaurant trade journal. If you're not familiar with trade journals, they're magazines that just go out to businesses and industries. You don't see them on the magazine racks at the store. And in this case, these are recipes. These are dinners that chefs have created for their restaurants, and they're putting the recipe in this magazine. So you find some pretty interesting recipes. Now I have to do a lot of prep work today, so let's just dive in and start cooking. I need to mince some shallot here, which is good because I have to use up some of this old shallot. I've had this for a while. I'm cutting long slices into this so then I can just cut through it like that. I need about a tablespoon, which that looks close to a tablespoon right there. I'm not cutting all the way down through because I want the end to hold it all together. Okay, that should be enough. I'm going to use a good part of that. Probably not going to use all of that because that's probably 2 or 3 tablespoons. So there's a tablespoon measure. That'll do right there. I'm going to finish my Béarnaise sauce by putting in chopped fresh tarragon leaves. For that, I don't want the stems, obviously. I want to mince just the leaves. So I'm going to be pulling the leaves off for my finishing tarragon. I need about a teaspoon of chopped fresh tarragon to finish my sauce. So I don't want any leaves, any stems rather in that. I want this to be just the leaves. All right, that should be enough. Going to just give this a nice fine chop. I want to mince this down fairly well. There, it's kind of like chopping parsley. That should be enough. Got a teaspoon measure here. All right. This is going to be my finishing tarragon. I'm going to chop some more, and that's going to go into my reduction. When I make my reduction to flavor my Béarnaise, I need fresh tarragon in it. But because I'm going to be straining the solids out anyways, I can chop the tarragon, stems and all, because that's all going to get strained out. For my reduction, I need about 2 tablespoons of minced tarragon. I'm not worrying about the stems now. I don't want the biggest, woodiest stem, obviously. But I don't care about these stems because, as I mentioned, these are all going to get strained out afterwards. And I just put all of that in. That should be good enough, I'm hoping. Let me chop that down and see if I can get 2 tablespoons out of that. That looks good. I don't have to chop this too fine because this is just, as I mentioned, it's going to get strained out. So I have my tablespoon measure. There's 1, all of that will give me my second tablespoon. All right, so there's my fresh tarragon for my reduction. In this recipe, I'm going to be using clarified butter, and I always keep clarified butter in my refrigerator, but my jar is empty. So I'm going to show you today, because I have time on this video, I'm going to show you how to clarify butter. Now, I've got a story that goes with this. A friend that I used to work with left the job to go to culinary school because she wanted to be a pastry chef. And after her first lesson, she called me up and she said, "Let me tell you what we did in our first class." They had to clarify butter. So they melted a pound of butter, then with a spoon they skimmed off all of the foam, and then with the spoon then they spooned all of the pure butter fat into a container. And I thought, there's got to be a quicker, easier way than that. There is. I use one of these bulb basters to just slurp up the butter fat, pour it into my jar. It takes like minutes. So I'm going to demonstrate clarifying butter today. I'm heating a little pan on the stove here, into which I'm going to put a large 1 pound block of butter that I cut in half. I'm heating this over low heat because I don't want to boil my liquid, which would agitate the water and the butter fat, bringing it all together. I want to keep them separated. So I'm going to keep my temperature low. It's going to take a while for this to melt, but once it does, you'll see that the junk that I want to get rid of comes to the top, and it's easy to skim off. Then I can collect the butter fat. My butter now has completely melted, and you can see this foam on the top. And there underneath is my pure butter fat. So using a little ladle here, I'm going to skim off as much of this foam as I can. I have a little bowl here to collect this. Some of this is already sinking down to the bottom. That's the water in it that's causing it to sink, because water is heavier than fat. And that's fine. And now with my bulb baster, I can start sucking up this clean, clear butter fat. I'm trying not to disturb this too much. I'm going gently because I don't want to stir up that water that's in the bottom. So there it is. Pure, clean butter fat. No water, no salt. Beautiful, clear color. That's what you want as far as clarified butter. This, on the other hand, is all the junk that came out of it. I mean, there's a lot of air in there because it's foamy. I'm seeing a little tiny band of butter fat right here that escaped into the refuse when I was skimming stuff off the top. That's fine. You can't get out every molecule. Alton Brown thinks you can save this for putting on popcorn. Yuck. It's got a lot of water in it. If you've ever put water on popcorn, it shrivels. So the only place I can imagine to put this is in the trash. Into a small pan here, I want to put, this is 1/4 cup, 60 milliliters of dry white wine. You can use vermouth. 1/4 cup, 60 milliliters of tarragon vinegar. These are my minced shallots. Again, about 1 tablespoon of minced shallots that I minced earlier. I need 3 coarsely cracked black peppercorns. I tried putting them in a little bowl and cracking them with a spoon. Didn't work. What I finally did was, on the bottom of my pepper mill, I just wound the adjuster way out so that it was really open, and then I cracked, basically ground some pepper, but I got big chunks of ground pepper. That'll be my cracked pepper. Whatever works. My 3 peppercorns that are cracked, and then about 2 tablespoons of chopped tarragon. And again, that's with the stems in there because I don't care. All of that is going to get filter it out when I strain it. And then I'm going to put a small pinch of salt in there, not much, maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon, just to get it started. I'll be adjusting this for salt later. So now this is ready to put on the stove and start concentrating. Reductions, whether it's a bourbon reduction, a port reduction, a brandy reduction, whatever, they're ways of flavoring sauces because you concentrate the flavors. You don't have a lot of liquid left, but you have a lot of flavor. And then you add your other ingredients to make your sauce, and that reduction is what really flavors the sauce. So my next step now here is to make my reduction. I've brought my liquid to a boil there. This recipe, as I mentioned, comes from a restaurant trade journal, and in the recipe it says to reduce this until 98% of the liquid is gone. I don't know that you need to be that precise, but you do want to reduce this down until most of the liquid has evaporated. You obviously need some liquid so that you can strain it. I have to beat some egg yolks here. I could use my wire whisk. I've done it this way for a long time, but I have a new toy. Well, sort of new. I've had it for a while. It's my battery-powered whisk. Works pretty well. My reduction is just about done on the stove, so I'm going to be beating my egg yolks next. That's 3 yolks from 3 large eggs, and I'm going to be using my battery-powered whisk to do this. And I just want to beat these until they're a little bit frothy and just sort of looking like they're starting to thicken a little bit. My reduction is done. I've got very little liquid left in that pan. That's what I want. So I'm going to pour this liquid into that little strainer. And you can even press that a little bit to force a few more drops of liquid out, because that's going to add a little bit more flavor to the sauce. And there it is. There isn't much in there. You don't need much, but that's what's going to flavor our Béarnaise sauce. Now what I need to do is I need to cool this down really quickly. So I have a couple of tablespoons of cold butter, and I'm just going to stir that in there to cool that down. I can return this to the heat a little bit to continue melting that butter. I don't want the liquid hot because that would cook the egg yolks when I put them in there. I just want the liquid to be warm and the butter melted. So I'm going to run this over the stove just a little bit just to melt that butter. There is my mixture, and that is cool. That's probably about 60 degrees. So the butter is melted in there, but this is not hot. This is not going to cook my egg yolks. There are my beat egg yolks. I'm going to whisk these in. Just kind of drizzle them in and whisk them in until they're all incorporated. In the meantime, I'm heating water on the stove because I'm going to set up a double boiler. If you're not familiar with a double boiler, it's a safe way to heat up delicate ingredients so that you don't overheat them. In my case, I'm going to be cooking and thickening those egg yolks, but if I cook them too much, they turn into scrambled eggs. The mixture is ruined. There's nothing to do but toss it in the trash and start over again. I don't want to do that. Now, some cooks will cook the egg yolks over an open flame. Julia Child did it while she used an electric stove. If you're comfortable doing that and you don't mind taking the risk, go ahead. I like to use a double boiler because the boiling water isn't going to exceed 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. The flame on the stove is hundreds of degrees hot. So by working over that relatively low heat, I'm protecting my eggs from cooking too rapidly and giving me scrambled eggs. So there's my simmering water. Just going to set this pan over it and then constantly stirring. I'm going to watch my egg yolks the whole time, and it's at the first sign of this beginning to thicken, as this comes up to a thickening temperature, I'm going to get this off the heat. If any lumps start to appear, immediately get it off the heat and start beating it vigorously with a whisk to hopefully break those up before you turn the whole mixture into scrambled eggs. I'm just starting to see some thickening here. Going to work very closely. Watch this closely. I'm turning this into like a custard. Some recipes say to strain the liquid afterwards to get rid of the lumps, but I find that if you just very carefully cook it, you don't end up with lumps. Okay, see, that's starting to thicken. That's almost what I would call a coats a spoon stage. I've done this so many times, and I always use a double boiler because I don't want to take any chances with it and overcook it. Look at that. Nicely thick. I am done with that. Returning now to my battery-powered whisk. I'm going to start working in melted butter, a little at a time. This is 1/2 cup to 2/3 of a cup of melted butter. This is my clarified butter. You want to put it in like a tablespoon at a time and completely incorporate it before you add more. In metrics, it's about 120 to 160 milliliters of melted clarified butter. And this is the same thing you would do when making a hollandaise sauce. There is my finished sauce. All my butter is in there now. And then my last step now is to put in the last of my minced tarragon and get that blended in. And there is my Béarnaise sauce. I want to taste that, and I can adjust that for salt. If you want to thin that down a little bit, if you want a more runny sauce, you can add a little bit of white wine to that to thin it down. So there is my Béarnaise. I did adjust it for salt. It needed a little bit of salt. I have to tell you, for not liking vinegar in food, this tastes very good. This next step is going to be a challenge because I have never done anything like this ever in my life. I have to get the meat out of king crab legs, and I've never done it before. So I have to break the shell apart at the joints without stabbing myself, because there's spines on there. Oh good, the cartilage came out. And then I looked it up on the internet. It said use a crab zipper. This doesn't have a zipper. So I'm going to use a pair of scissors. This should work well enough. The shell is soft enough that you can just cut through it. Ta-da! And there is the nice piece of crab meat. So I have a few more of these to do, and that's going to be the crab meat. Yes, that's a plane going overhead. I do live near the airport. That's going to be the crab meat for my Oscar style filet mignon. So there's my crab meat. This should be enough for 2 steaks. This was only one of those crab legs. I actually have 3 more remaining. I'll save those for later. That'll be a nice treat. In the meantime, what I'm doing is I'm warming some clarified butter on the stove to warm the meat in. I'm using clarified butter because it has a higher smoke point. I won't have to think about it burning, but I'm going to heat the butter over a low flame because I don't want to cook the crab legs. They're already cooked. I just want to warm the meat through. The last thing I need to do is prepare my asparagus. Like eggplant, asparagus spoils easily, so try to use it the same day or the following day after you purchase it. I bought these last night, so these should be fine. Cut the bottoms off, maybe an inch or so off the bottom, and then just stack them in water in the refrigerator upright like this, and they should stay fine until you're ready to cook them. The bottom part of these is a little woody, so you just kind of hold them until they snap. The woody part's going to snap off. Some will be larger than the others, but that's all you need to do. I'm going to do maybe 4 or 5 of these, maybe half a dozen. And then that'll be my asparagus for my steak dinner. The rest of these I can cook and have with my crab meat. I'm getting ready now to start cooking. I'm going to cook my steaks on a stovetop cast iron grill because I want nice pronounced bar marks on them. You could cook the steaks in a skillet, or you could cook them outdoors on an outdoor grill, however you like to prepare your steaks. But the first thing I need to do is season my meat with salt and pepper before I put it on the grill. I'm going to do 2 steaks today. One of these is a nice cut of steak. The other is an end piece, but that'll be fine. I can work with that. I want to season these with salt and pepper. I'm using, of course, freshly ground black pepper, and then do the other side. Wipe my hands. Season. And now these are ready to go on the grill. I'm heating my cast iron stovetop grill over medium heat. This takes about 10 minutes before it comes up to full temperature. I'm lubricating it here with safflower oil. And the reason why I'm using safflower oil is because it has a high smoke point, like 510 degrees, 266 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to wait for that to come up to temperature, and then I'll be ready to start cooking the meat. I'm also going to cook my asparagus on the grill as well, but I'll put that on when the meat is close to being done so that the asparagus doesn't get overcooked. My grill now is coming up to temperature. I'm going to place my meat on there. Like so. Now, let's talk about cooking temperatures, cooking time. I'm not going to cook these by time because to get an expensive cut of meat cooked perfectly, you really want to cook it to the ideal internal temperature. I'm looking for something around a medium rare, so I'm going to go to about 135 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature. That's 57 degrees centigrade. And when I remove that from the heat and let it rest, the hottest part of the meat will still yield some heat. It'll migrate to the center and give me an internal temperature of maybe 140 to 145 degrees. The USDA recommends cooking all cuts of meat to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 63 degrees Celsius. I'm going to go a little bit lower than that because I want a more tender cut of meat. Now, how I'm going to check this is with a digital thermometer. As I said, it's hard to know how long to cook a meat. Ideally, you check the meat with a thermometer to see what it's like inside. When it reaches the ideal temperature, take it off the heat. Oh, and one other point too is if you want nice bar marks on your meat, don't keep moving it around because your bar marks will get all mixed up and crisscrossed. Just leave it sit in one place and let it cook. And those bar marks will be really well pronounced when you finally turn the meat over. I'm ready to turn these over. These now have actually been cooking for 12 minutes on one side. Look at those bar marks. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to move these down. I'm going to reduce my heat in this other section, and in a few minutes I'll put my asparagus spears on there and I'll cook that. See, this is why you want to leave the meat alone when it's on the grill. You'll get those nice bar marks. I am ready to start plating. So, I'm going to put one of my steaks on my plate. Put my grilled broccoli spears on my plate. And then I'm going to put one piece of crab on top of my steak. And this is my Béarnaise sauce. I'm going to put over that and over my asparagus. And then I'm going to put another piece on top so that it really shows up, not covered with the Béarnaise. And that is ready to taste. I'm so excited to see what this is going to taste like. I cut a little bit of the steak off. Got a little bit of my crab meat. Oh wow. That is very good. That is better than very good. That is fantastic. And this is some of my asparagus. Cooked, tender, crisp. Oh, this is fantastic. So excuse me, but I got to go enjoy my Oscar style filet mignon and asparagus. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.